In a land where the sun scorched the earth and the wind howled like a mournful ghost, a lonely rancher cried over a grave for 10 long winters, his tears mingling with the dust of his forgotten past. This was Silas McGraw, a man of few words and heavy burdens, whose heart had been locked away since the day tragedy had struck. For years he had buried himself in the rugged landscape of the West, far from the bustling towns and the prying eyes of the world, nursing his sorrow under the relentless sky. Silas's ranch stood isolated at the foot of the jagged hills, where the ground was cracked and dry, a testament to the harsh realities of life in this unforgiving territory. The only company he kept were the shadows of memories that whispered through the trees and the haunting cries of crows that circled overhead. He had once been a man of principle, a lawman who stood for justice, but the weight of loss had twisted him into a recluse, a ghost among the living. Yet amid the desolation, Silas had forged a meager existence. He tended to his cattle and tilled the land, but the loneliness was as palpable as the wind that swept across the plains. Every day he would walk to the grave of his beloved wife, Anna, placing a single wildflower upon the cold earth, a silent ritual that had become as much a part of his life as the sun rising each dawn. On one fateful afternoon, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, a distant sound broke the stillness. It was a wail, raw and heart-wrenching, carried by the breeze like a cry for help. Silas paused, his hand resting on the weathered fence post, a sense of unease creeping into his chest. In this desolate place, cries rarely belonged to the living, and his instincts warned him of the danger that often lurked beyond the horizon. Curiosity tugged at him, pulling him away from the sanctuary of his grief. He mounted his horse, a sturdy beast named Jasper, and followed the sound, navigating through the rugged terrain that had become as familiar to him as his own skin. The cries grew louder, echoing through the canyons until they reached a clearing where the sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. What Silas saw next would change the course of his life. There, huddled together in a small grove of trees, were 5 young girls, their faces streaked with dirt and their eyes wide with fear. They were Native American, their clothes tattered and their spirits visibly worn. In that moment, the rancher's heart pounded in his chest, torn between the instinct to help and the weight of prejudice that had been ingrained in him by a society quick to judge. He dismounted and approached cautiously, the weight of his past colliding with the reality before him. The girls looked up, their eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and terror. It was a sight that struck Silas deeply, awakening a flicker of something he thought he had lost forever, a sense of purpose. Yet the danger was palpable. The land was not safe for those who bore the scars of oppression, and he knew the risks of offering them shelter. "Who are you?" Silas asked, his voice rough from disuse, a mere shadow of the authority he once wielded as a lawman. The eldest girl, perhaps no more than 12, stepped forward, her small frame trembling as she spoke. "We are lost," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our village was attacked. We fled, but they are coming. Please, we need help." In that moment, Silas felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The prejudices of his upbringing clashed with the raw reality of these children's plight. They were vulnerable, orphaned by a violence that went unnoticed by those in power, and the decision before him was anything but simple. To help them would mean defying the very norms that had governed his existence, risking his own safety in a landscape where a white man's support for Native Americans could ignite a firestorm of retribution. As he stood there, memories of his own lost family flooded his mind, his wife's laughter echoing in his ears as if she were standing beside him. He remembered the pain of helplessness, the burning desire to protect those he loved. Could he turn his back on these girls? Could he allow prejudice to dictate his actions when their lives hung in the balance? "Come with me," he finally said, his voice steadier than he felt. The girls exchanged glances filled with disbelief and relief, but Silas knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger. The very forces that had shattered their lives could soon be upon them, and the rancher's decision had set into motion a series of events that would challenge everything he believed. As they made their way back to the ranch, Silas could feel the weight of the world shifting. The dust of the past still clung to him, but perhaps, just perhaps, these girls could help him find a way to rise above it. The old principles he had held dear would be tested, And as he looked at the frightened faces of the children beside him, he realized that he was no longer just a man haunted by grief. He was now a protector, thrust into a battle against a corrupt system that thrived on division. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a deep shade over the land, and with it came the promise of a storm, both in the skies and within the hearts of those who dared to challenge the status quo. Silas McGraw had chosen his path, and the coming days would reveal the true cost of standing against injustice in a world where the line between right and wrong was often blurred. The fight for survival had begun, and it would test not only his resolve, but the very fabric of humanity itself. As night fell over the ranch, Silas gathered the 5 orphan girls around a flickering fire. Their faces were illuminated by the flames, revealing the flicker of hope battling against the shadows of fear. He felt their eyes on him, searching for reassurance, for strength, and he realized that this moment was pivotal, not just for them, but for him as well. He spoke softly, sharing stories of courage and resilience, tales that made the wild land seem less daunting. As the embers danced upward, he noticed the girls slowly relaxing, their laughter breaking through the tension that had settled in the air. Yet, in the back of his mind, the specter of danger loomed larger. The town was restless, and news of their arrival would surely travel fast. The following morning, Silas awoke to the sound of hooves approaching. His heart quickened as he peered out, spotting the sheriff and a posse of men, their faces hardened by the sun, and their intentions cloaked in menace. The sheriff, a man named Dalton Greaves, was known for his ruthless ways, capitalizing on fear and chaos to maintain control. Silas felt a chill run down his spine. He knew Greaves had little patience for those who disrupted his plans. "McGraw!" Greaves called out, his voice booming across the landscape. "We need to have a word about those girls." Silas stepped into view, standing firm against the growing storm. "They're under my care now, Sheriff. They're not your concern." Greaves dismounted, a sneer etched across his face. "They're orphaned, lost in a world that eats up the weak. You're putting your life and theirs in danger by keeping them here. You know how the townsfolk feel about your kind helping theirs." The weight of the sheriff's words hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the prejudices that ran deep through the veins of the community. Silas felt the pressure mounting, the need to protect the girls clashing with the reality of what Greaves could do. "Let them go," Greaves continued, his tone a mix of menace and persuasion. "I can find a place for them where they won't have to worry about a man like you." Silas bristled, but he held his ground. "They are my responsibility now. I won't abandon them." Just as tension peaked, a voice spoke from behind him. It was Ayanna, the eldest of the girls, her spirit unbroken despite the circumstances. "We belong here with Silas. We aren't afraid of you." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. He turned to Silas, a new calculation forming in his mind. "You're making a mistake, McGraw. The town won't stand for this. You'll be branded a traitor." Silas felt the gravity of the threat, but a fire ignited within him. He understood that this was more than just about survival. It was about standing for something greater than himself. "Then let them brand me," Silas replied, resolute. "I'd rather be a traitor in the eyes of the corrupt than a coward in the eyes of these girls." Greaves's expression darkened, and Silas knew that the true battle was only beginning. The sheriff summoned his men, gesturing for them to draw closer. "You think you can protect them? You're playing a dangerous game, McGraw. You don't know the lengths I'll go to keep order." As they exchanged heated words, Silas caught a glimpse of a flicker of movement from the corner of his eye. It was a young boy from the nearby settlement, standing at a distance, eyes wide with fear, but filled with curiosity. In that moment, a revelation struck Silas with the force of a thunderclap. He recalled whispers he'd heard about Greaves, rumors of shady dealings and underhanded schemes that tied him to land disputes and exploitation. If he could uncover the truth about the sheriff's corruption, he might turn the tides in his favor. The tension between Silas and Greaves hung palpably in the air, but now Silas's resolve was steeled by the prospect of exposing the man who thrived on the suffering of others. It was time to confront the true villain lurking in the shadows of their lives, and perhaps in doing so he could protect not only the girls, but also the very soul of the land he called home. The confrontation would come soon enough, but for now Silas knew he had to outsmart Greaves, gathering allies from unexpected places. He turned back to the girls, who looked up at him with admiration and trust. "Stay close," he said, the weight of his choices settling in. "This fight is just beginning." As dusk settled over the rugged landscape, the shadows of the canyon deepened, mirroring the darkening storm in Silas's heart. He could feel it in the air, the tension crackling like a dry branch ready to snap. Silas had been preparing for Greaves's arrival, knowing the man wouldn't take kindly to his meddling. The girls huddled close, their innocence a stark contrast to the looming threat that approached. The sound of hooves echoed through the canyon, accompanied by the clink of spurs and the low growl of a man who had long since traded his humanity for power. Greaves appeared, flanked by a couple of his enforcers, men with hard faces and harder hearts like the land that bore them. The sheriff's eyes glinted with malice as he regarded Silas, who stood resolute, the girls safely behind him. "Well, well, if it ain't the noble rancher playing protector," Greaves drawled, his voice dripping with disdain. "What brings you to this fine evening? Got yourself a couple of lost sheep?" Silas felt the weight of Greaves' words like a noose tightening around his neck. "They're under my care now, Greaves. You won't lay a hand on them." Greaves chuckled darkly, his men joining in with a rough, mocking laugh that echoed against the rocky walls. "Care? Is that what you call it? You think these girls are safe with you out here in the wild where every whisper could lead to a knife in the dark?" Silas's jaw tightened, but he stood firm. "I've seen enough bloodshed. Your reign of terror ends here." With a flick of his wrist, Greaves signaled his men to step forward, but Silas held his ground. "You think you can intimidate me? You think I don't know what you've been doing? Land deals, false charges, all to line your pockets while the people suffer." For a moment, silence hung heavy, the tension palpable as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the canyon. It was then that the second hook dropped, a revelation that would change everything. "You're not the only one with secrets, Silas. Those girls? They're not just orphans. They're the last of the Blackfoot tribe. Their land was stolen and you're risking your neck for a lost cause." Silas felt the air leave his lungs, a sickening realization dawning upon him. The girls had not merely escaped Greaves. They were the embodiment of a struggle he thought he understood, but had barely scratched the surface of. They were not just innocent victims, but symbols of a fight for their home. Greaves smirked, savoring the moment. "That land you're so keen to protect. It's worth more than you can imagine. And now with them in your care, you've put a target on your back. I'm feeling generous. Walk away now, and I might let you keep your life." Silas's heart raced as he weighed his options, the girl's eyes wide with fear but also defiance. It was time to turn the tide. "I'll not abandon them to your greed, Greaves. The truth will come to light, and when it does, you'll be the one hunted." Greaves's laughter echoed through the canyon, a sound devoid of warmth. "Then let the games begin, rancher. You've made your choice. Just remember, every choice has its consequences." As the sun dipped fully below the horizon, Silas felt the chill of night settling in. Yet amidst the looming threat, he could see a flicker of hope. A spark ignited in the girl's eyes. The battle was far from over, and now it was not just about survival. It was about justice. Silas had allies in unexpected places, and together they would uncover the truth that had been buried beneath lies and bloodshed. The night was dark, but Silas knew he had the strength to face whatever came next. The wind howled through the barren landscape, carrying with it whispers of the past and promises of the future. Silas stood resolute, his silhouette stark against the dying light, a man forged by loss yet driven by a newfound purpose. The orphan girls huddled close, their innocent faces etched with worry, but filled with an unyielding spirit that mirrored his own. The next morning arrived with a bitter bite, the ground still frozen from the night's chill. Silas gathered the girls, their small hands clutching his worn coat as they ventured beyond the familiar confines of the ranch. They headed toward the neighboring town, where shadows of corruption loomed large, and the truth was waiting to be unearthed. Each step carried the weight of their mission, a quest for justice in a world that had too often turned a blind eye. As they reached town, Silas's eyes scanned the streets, searching for faces that might still harbor honor amidst the greed. He knew of old friends, men who had once stood beside him against the tide of injustice. Yet he also remembered the treachery of those who had turned their backs when the stakes grew too high. Greaves's influence loomed like a storm cloud, his grip on the town both palpable and suffocating. In the town square, Silas spotted a familiar figure. Sheriff Thompson, a man once known for his integrity, now a mere puppet dangling on Greaves's strings. Silas approached cautiously, knowing that confronting him could either rally support or spell disaster. "Sheriff," Silas called out, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "I need your ear. Greaves is planning something that could cost lives." Thompson's eyes darted, revealing the struggle within. "You're treading dangerous ground, Silas. Greaves doesn't take kindly to threats, and he has the law on his side." "Then we must make the law work for us," Silas replied, determination hardening his resolve. "I've uncovered evidence against him. The girls, his greed extends to them, using them as pawns in his schemes. We can expose him, but I need your help." The sheriff hesitated, the conflict evident in his furrowed brow. But as Silas spoke of the girls' plight, of the innocent lives intertwined with his own tragic past, Thompson's resolve began to crack. He recalled the man Silas once was, and felt a flicker of the courage he had long since buried. "I'll listen," Thompson finally said, his voice low. "But you must understand, if Greaves catches wind, it'll be more than just your life at stake." Together they devised a plan, weaving together the threads of their collective resolve. Silas knew they needed proof, something that would bring the townsfolk together against Greaves's tyranny. As they gathered allies, whispers of the rancher's bravery began to spread, igniting a flicker of hope among the oppressed. Days turned into a blur of preparations, and Silas felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. As they pieced together the truth, an unexpected ally emerged from the shadows. An elderly Native American woman named Mako, whose wisdom ran deeper than the roots of the land. She had witnessed Greaves's treachery firsthand and held the key to revealing his dark dealings. "Silas," she said, her voice steady like the mountains, "the past has its ways of coming back. What you seek can only be found in the heart of the truth. We must gather what we can, for the winds are shifting, and they will carry your name far and wide." With Mako's guidance, Silas and the girls ventured into the heart of the town, gathering testimonies and forging alliances, each new revelation weaving a tapestry of resistance against the greed that threatened to consume them. But time was slipping through their fingers like sand, and the shadow of Greaves loomed ever larger. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the skies with the colors of war, Silas prepared for the confrontation ahead. The storm was coming, but he was ready. With the girls at his side, Mako's wisdom guiding him, and Thompson standing firm, they would face whatever darkness Greaves unleashed. The truth would be their weapon, and together they would fight to reclaim not just their lives, but their dignity. And in that moment, Silas found the strength he thought he had lost. A fire ignited in his heart that would not be extinguished. The battle for justice was about to unfold, and he knew that the power of hope could shatter the chains of fear. As the night deepened, a sense of purpose enveloped them all, and they stood poised at the edge of a reckoning, ready to confront the darkness that had long overshadowed their lives. As dawn broke over the scarred landscape, the air crackled with tension. Silas, Mako, and the girls stood in front of the town hall, the heart of Greaves's power, where the corrupt lawman was preparing to solidify his grip on the community. They had gathered evidence, testimonies, and a small but resolute group of townsfolk willing to stand against the tide of greed. Silas stepped forward, heart pounding, as he called out to the gathered crowd, "We stand here today, not just as ranchers or townsfolk, but as human beings. Greaves has spun a web of lies, exploiting our fears to line his own pockets, but together we can unravel that web." His voice rang out, steady and clear, cutting through the murmur of doubt. Mako stepped beside him, his presence a grounding force. "Our stories matter. The truth is stronger than any weapon. The girls, the ones Greaves sought to silence, are the very embodiment of our shared humanity. We cannot let his cruelty define us." With each word the crowd shifted, uncertainty giving way to resolve. Silas laid out the evidence they had collected, revealing how Greaves had manipulated the town's fears and stoked racial tensions for his own gain. Each testimony spoke of injustice, of lives shattered by the greed of one man. The truth began to resonate in their hearts, igniting a flicker of courage. Then, from the back of the crowd, a familiar voice rang out, one of the townsfolk Silas had saved from Greaves's thugs. "We can't let this continue. We all saw what he did to the girls. We all know the truth." The crowd roared in agreement, emboldened by the shared anger and grief that tied them together. As the uproar grew, Greaves, once so confident, emerged from the town hall, his face pale and twisted with fury. "You think your words can stop me? I own this town. You'll regret this," he bellowed, but his voice wavered, revealing the cracks in his once impenetrable facade. In that moment, Silas felt the weight of the past lift. He had confronted his own demons, and with the truth as their shield, he knew they could face whatever came next. "This is not just about Greaves," he shouted back. "It's about every time we've stood aside and let fear dictate our actions. We choose justice today." The tide had turned. The townsfolk surged forward, confronting Greaves, their numbers too great to silence. In the chaos, Marco stepped into the fray, revealing Greaves's dealings with outside interests, documents that linked him to a larger conspiracy aimed at displacing the native community. The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd, unraveling the last threads of Greaves's power. As lawmen loyal to Greaves attempted to restore order, Silas and Marco stood firm, armed not with guns, but with the undeniable truth. "You are outnumbered by the people you've wronged," Marco declared. "Today we claim our lives back." With the crowd behind them, Silas felt a surge of hope and determination. Greaves's empire of deceit crumbled under the weight of collective resolve, the town rallying to expose the corruption that had plagued them for far too long. In the aftermath, as the sun set once more over the town, Silas reflected on the journey they had taken. It had been a struggle not just against Greaves, but against the darkness within themselves. They had chosen courage over fear, unity over division, and in doing so they had forged a new beginning. "Justice is not just about retribution," Silas mused, his voice carrying a weight of wisdom. "It's about understanding, mercy, and the courage to stand for what is right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. It is a choice we make every day, and together we've shown that our voices can ring louder than the gunfire of the past." As they looked out over their town, now a symbol of resilience and hope, Silas knew their fight was far from over, but they had taken the first step, and that was a victory worth celebrating. The Old West was a harsh land, but in their hearts, a new frontier of justice and unity had begun to bloom. And perhaps in the end, it was the shared human experience, the understanding of pain, the quest for dignity, that would light their path forward, reminding them all that true strength lies not in the gun but in the heart.